Welcome back, America. We have Senator Ted Cruz with us. He is on the Senate Judiciary Committee and the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Ted Cruz, welcome. It's my understanding that the vast majority of Republicans in the Senate and the House are saying Iran must dismantle its nuclear program. It's not a joke. Yes. We know what it means when people talk about a civil or civilian nuclear program. We're not going to be fooled. They must dismantle their program. Is that what you understand?
That is exactly right. And I got to say, Mark, there's a real contrast between the strength that President Trump has shown with respect to Iran and the weakness and appeasement that Joe Biden showed for 4 years. The first term, President Trump took on Iran directly, pulled out of the disastrous Obama-Iran nuclear deal. He ended the civilian nuclear waivers. He ended the oil waivers. And the result, maximum pressure, put the Iranian economy into free fall. Their oil sales fell from 1 million barrels a day of oil down all the way down to 300,000 barrels of oil. When Joe Biden came into office, the Iranian economy was in shambles, and the Ayatollah and the mullahs were teetering and near collapse. But sadly, Biden reversed everything. He did complete appeasement. He stopped enforcing the oil sanctions. And as a result, the Ayatollah's oil sales skyrocketed from 300,000 barrels a day to 2 million barrels a day. That's $100 billion that Joe Biden and the Democrats gave the Ayatollah. And the Ayatollah is using it to fund the IRGC to attack and kill Americans. The Ayatollah is using that to fund Hamas and Hezbollah. In a very real sense, Joe Biden and the money he gave the Ayatollah funded October 7th. Now that Donald Trump is back in office, he's drawn a clear red line. Iran must dismantle their nuclear capacity. They must shut down their centrifuges. It is the only thing that is verifiable is full dismantlement. And I have every confidence the president is going to hold that line.
I do. But I don't have any confidence in the Iranians who lie and cheat and steal and murder.
Yes.
And so the question is, how can we expect a regime that does all those things and is not abided by anything it's agreed to, anything it has promised over the course of the last 15 years? So here we are at the 11th hour. Here we are at the 11th hour trying to deal with this. How can we trust them? Or better put, we're not going to trust them. How do we make sure that they do what we tell them they must do?
Well, listen, we can't trust them because we know that they lie, and they lie over and over and over again. It's worth noting the Ayatollah right now today is actively trying to murder Donald J. Trump, has hired hitmen trying to murder the President of the United States. The Ayatollah is also actively trying to murder the former Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, and the former National Security Advisor, John Bolton. They have hired hitmen that are targeting former senior U.S. officials and the sitting President of the United States. These are not people who can be trusted, which is why the objective must be full dismantlement, must be the centrifuges disassembled, destroyed, taken out. And as President Trump said recently, we can do that either nicely or not so nicely. Nicely if they agree and we go in and dismantle them ourselves, or not so nicely is if Iran refuses to negotiate, we have the capability to take out these nuclear facilities. And I got to say, Mark, you and I have talked about this. Listen, there are some voices in the Trump administration that are on the isolationist wing of foreign policy that say, let's not worry about Iran. Let's not do anything about Iran. And listen, I am someone who is very reluctant to use military force, but Iran is trying to build nuclear weapons because Iran wants to be able to threaten to use nuclear weapons, and they might even use them. And I believe a nuclear Iran is an unacceptable threat of seeing an atomic bomb detonated in the skies of New York or the skies of Los Angeles. And so our commander-in-chief, President Trump, I don't think he's going to allow that risk. We are going to demand the centrifuges, the nuclear capability be dismantled, and they either do so willingly or they'll be dismantled unwillingly.
And I want these fifth column isolationists to understand this is the view of tens of millions of us. It's not the view of warmongers and neocons and the other sloganeering that they do. Red-blooded Americans who are onto these terrorists, who are onto Iran, and do not want them to have a nuclear weapon, which they could use the way they attacked us on 9/11. We'll be right back.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.